first 60 minutes, and we'll be doing breakout sessions in the last 30 minutes. Stick around if you want to. We're very interested in hearing your input as behavioral experts, people in this field interested in the nexus of behavior, energy, and climate change for directing the future of the research on this topic. And your input is invaluable as it will be used to inform DOE's future research directions in this area. So to get started, Pamela, can you please take it from here and introduce today's esteemed panel?
Yes, thank you so much, Reuven. I'm going to give you all a little caveat. I'm having some throat issues, so I have to maybe go on mute and cough for a second. Please excuse me, but then I'll come back. My name is Pamela Fan. I am the founder and CEO of Integrated Solutions, an energy services company that supports project installation work, workforce development, and civic engagement. Through my civic engagement work, I was able to work with a wonderful organization, Clean Cities, Georgia, on clean transportation planning with disadvantaged community, or what I like to call opportunity communities. But for the sake of this work and how it's presented, we'll call it in its technical term for disadvantaged communities. And through that work, in Georgia specifically, we were able to work with 3 communities, and we just so happen to have one of those communities here with us on the call today to talk about this CG program and developing a community clean transportation action plan for them. So with me today, I have Summer Pomeroy. Summer is the program manager for the Sustainable Communities and Transportation team for Clean Cities, Georgia, which is hosted at South Base here in Atlanta. We also have on the call Aaron Andrews Scherer. Aaron is a project lead at the National Renewable Labs. And then we have Mr. Chuck Barlow. Chuck Barlow is the co-founder and CEO and board chair of the Henderson High School Alumni Association Trust, located in Jackson, Georgia. I will tell you that one of the reasons why I worked on this clean transportation plan with Clean Cities was primarily because I know how many charging oases and deserts there are out there, and that wanting to ensure that we're considering equitable transportation as we're going through this process of electrification was very important to me and my organization. And when Clean Cities said that they were looking for a community engagement liaison and someone who would help through this process of looking at clean transportation, I jumped all over it. I just thought it was amazing that they were doing that. And so to learn more about this program, I'm going to go ahead and start with both Sumner and Aaron. If you guys can talk a little bit about this program and how we developed this program and how it started. Sumner, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks. I'm going to jump in first and then I'll pass it off to Sumner.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. We'll tag team this a little bit. But my name is Erin. Again, as Pam said, I work with the National Renewable Energy Lab. And we work very closely with the Department of Energy to support what we call the Clean Cities and Communities Coalition. And so the Clean Cities and Communities, it's a partnership with the Department of Energy to advance clean transportation nationwide. So there are more than 75 designated coalitions that work in urban, rural, suburban areas, and they essentially have a collaborative network in which they are working to strengthen environmental, energy security, and economic prosperity. So really focusing on clean transportation initiatives and how they can advance that in their community. So the Clean Cities and Communities Energy and Environmental Justice Initiative, which is what we'll talk a little bit more about, was developed out of the recognition that coalitions were uniquely positioned to support in the efforts to build a more equitable transportation system. So recognizing that we need to first acknowledge that there's entrenched segregation and limited opportunities for people of color due to generations of deliberate policy decisions at the federal, state, and local level that were explicitly racist. And so we're here today talking about the disparity in EV adoption in disadvantaged communities. And this is a system or a symptom of perpetuating inequity throughout the transportation system. So really recognizing, what we are here dealing with today and kind of the existing conditions and wanting to do something different than what has been done in the past. So the framework for the Clean Cities Energy and Environmental Justice Initiative really considers how we change this process. So who is at the decision-making table, what transportation options are prioritized, and who benefits from these transportation projects. So really challenging ourselves and the coalitions to think about these factors as we go out into communities to think about what clean transportation solutions look like. And all of this is kind of swirling around in the space with federal initiatives that are happening at the same time. So efforts to prioritize equity essentially through the Biden administration in the Justice 40 initiative. So this initiative reflects a federal commitment to tackling longstanding environmental justice issues, including things related to climate change, clean transit, affordable and sustainable housing, things that were super relatable to our Clean Cities and Communities coalitions. So essentially, they established a goal that 40% of the overall benefits of certain federal investments flow to disadvantaged communities. And through this effort, actually, the Vehicle Technologies Office, which is an office of the Department of Energy, was designated as a J40 pilot program. So this is the office that funds or helps these coalitions. And so through all of this effort, we were sort of tasked with figuring out what does a pilot program look like and how do we think about kind of this J40 initiative and prioritizing equity, and how do we support the Clean Cities and Communities coalitions to do this work? So I won't run through all of these, but there are a handful of priority areas that the Department of Energy established that really help us focus in on how do we want to really hone in our efforts as we're supporting Clean Cities and Communities and facilitating this program. So thinking about things like reducing energy and transportation costs, building capacity in communities, connecting communities with the information that they need. And again, as I mentioned earlier, Clean Cities and Communities coalitions are really well positioned to really be active in this space. And then finally, so as this was all kind of coming into fruition, we asked the coalitions and we said, hey, what do you need in order to do this equity work better, in order to connect with disadvantaged communities and really ensure that benefits are coming to these communities in the transition to electric vehicles, but also thinking about clean energy transitions in general. And really what the coalitions came back and told us is they said funding for project development is high in the priority list. And then also funding to support partner or community groups' participation in their efforts was high on the priority list. And then staffing knowledge and really having the staff capacity in order to go out and do the work. And so with that insight, we developed a program that Sumner and Pam will tell you more about, but it's called the Clean Cities Energy and Environmental Justice Initiative. And we have 17 coalitions who participated in this event, and each of them were able to hire a community engagement liaison. Can go to the next slide, Sumner. Perfect. So this kind of gives a map. We had a series of phases, but really we're thinking more broadly about energy and environmental justice within all of the coalitions, but then these 17 coalitions are highlighted in blue, and these are the ones that hired the community engagement liaison. And basically we tasked them with developing a clean transportation action plan with one or more communities to really ensure that the voices of these communities were directing the efforts of the coalition and the efforts to bring new technology into these communities in a way that actually benefits them.
Erin, was there anything else you wanted to add before I jump in?
No, I think that's it. Go ahead and talk about. So Clean Cities Georgia was one of these participating coalitions, and is one of these participating coalitions in this effort.
Thank you. And so to kind of tie up what Erin was sharing with y'all, again, I'm Sumner Pomeroy, Program Manager with Clean Cities Georgia. And so I've been involved in the program since the very first webinar. So phase 1 was a series of webinars. Phase 2 was some in-person trainings in which the coalition directors and staff who opted in were flown out to a couple different locations and to do some very in-depth 2-day trainings. And so I've totaled up over the course of time from the first webinar to now, I'm pretty sure I'm upwards of 80, 90 hours of training that's been provided, which is really phenomenal. And so we've gone into all sorts of different topics from just, looking at redlining and the different levels of systemic racism that has been distributed across the different sectors, as she said in the past, to how this has affected people's health and transportation access, to how we do meaningful community engagement, to how we can ensure that some of these funding dollars are reaching the communities that need it the most. So we've really covered a very broad range of topics. It's been very in-depth. And so I greatly appreciate that the DOE has put together this just rich resource for us as coalitions, because as we've stated, we each have our own different areas and we cover the entire state of Georgia, 159 counties. So it is no small feat, and we are a team of like 6 people. But we try and do lots of meaningful work. So what we do for the most part is we assist with fleet conversion. So any municipal or corporate fleets who have vehicles that want to convert to a cleaner option, we will help them with that. We can do that with grants, but also just through partnerships. We have, as a coalition, we have a group of stakeholders which include things like different vendors for EV charging, also can be for any of the fuels that you see listed here below: hydrogen, natural gas, renewable natural gas, even, which is just recaptured methane, and include infrastructure providers, vehicle providers, and other utilities and municipalities. And so aside from that, we also do education and outreach. So we'll do different events out in the community to share information about these different alternative fuels. We'll do EV car shows with different volunteers who show their vehicles and why they like to use their vehicles. So we just do a lot of different things across the gambit. But again, we are fuel agnostic, and we do work with any fuel that helps to reduce emissions and improve domestic energy security and improve air quality. So some of this you've seen in the previous slides, but just to highlight, in Georgia, that we've been able to hire Pamela Fan as our community engagement liaison, and her and I have been working closely together for working with these 3 communities that I'll get into a little bit more detail in just a moment. But what we've been, I think, seeing the most interest with the communities that we're working with are access to clean transportation that also improves air quality, as well as increases likelihood of economic development and opportunities. So those are just a few of the things that they're all intertwined, but those are 3 of the key ones from I'm going to call it CG for short, the Clean Cities Energy and Environmental Justice Initiative, that we've seen in working with our communities. So as we started brainstorming a little over a year ago, Pam and I, these are the 3 communities that we selected. Jackson, Georgia, because we had a wonderful partner already here with Chuck Barlow and the HASAT team. You guys will be able to hear more from him in a moment. As well as Covington, Georgia, which we had a relationship with as a previous interested and invested stakeholder. Both of these communities are semi-rural, about an hour and a half outside of the city of Atlanta, and they each have wonderful different features. So City of Jackson, just for fun information for y'all, is where Stranger Things is filmed. And then Covington, Georgia, famous thing that they're known for filming is The Vampire Diaries. But it's also where the Rivian plant is going to be just outside of, shortly is working on being built. So each of the communities had some vested interest in clean transportation, but also had a rich resources and community that wanted to be involved. The other community that we selected was, because it is a more difficult community to access, Beaufort Highway Corridor, for anyone who's at all familiar with Atlanta, going from Pleasant Hill Road to North Druid Hills. It's both inside and outside of the perimeter, and this is multi-jurisdictional, multilingual, and just has a charging desert. So it's a lot of different businesses, a lot of different languages. The most common languages spoken along this corridor are Spanish, Korean, Vietnamese, and Chinese. And there's so many different cultures to keep in mind, as well as the fact that there's multiple cities, multiple counties. So it's been an area that a lot of folks have wanted to focus on, want to see something develop, but it is difficult to engage the community because there are so many different nuances to keep in mind at once. And so we've been working to engage the folks that we can through some of the community-based organizations. And we're also going to be needing some translation services provided during this, again, making sure that this information is accessible in multiple languages. But this has been a tougher nut to crack, and so we're continuing to work on this. So some of the things that we've done, and we'll share more as we go, but Pam's done a phenomenal job of facilitating some conversations with these communities and asking folks, what do you want? What would you like to see? Some of the things that have come up have been, you know, if we want to convert some of our fleets, if we don't have public transit, can we get electric public transit or a clean public transit option? Bike lanes. Folks have been asking for regular bike lanes that connect parks, as well as, you know, if the regular bike lanes work, hey, we can also have e-bikes. Can we have an e-bike share program or an e-bike rebate program? So the communities that we've been working with really would like to see a variety of options. As we said, just more access to transportation in general, and are really engaged about wanting to get this kicked off. So one of the things that we're very excited that we're able to assist with is Jackson and Covington both went after some local dollars through state funds, and were able to get up to $150,000 each for EV charging that has been cited based off of what the community members and people who actually use them, where they would like to see it most located. And that's been in partnership with the local municipality, so that they are the ones implementing it, but with the community's direct feedback. So we're very excited to help them kick that off, but that is their project that we are just here to assist with. Pam, is there anything I left off that you wanted to add?
No, what I will add is there were a couple of things that both of you said. Aaron, in your description, it was directing what the communities want to see happen in their communities. And then Sumner also then stated, you know, how I utilize participatory facilitation with communities, as well as asset-based community development. And I think that that's really important because these are community implemented transportation plans. So it's actually what the community wants to see. And I know that we have ideas and we can think about, yeah, we want to go in and put in EVs, but it really is up to the community and having them think about how their communities are structured and what works best for their communities, and developing a plan based upon that. So these are truly community implemented plans. I will also go back to thinking of the communities that we selected in Georgia and why that was important. There's a lot of focus on the metro Atlanta area, that I felt that, you know, a lot of sustainability focus, but both Jackson and Covington are rural to Atlanta. They're still considered rural. While Buford Highway is not considered rural, I thought it would be, you know, in our best interest to always look at communities in areas, not just that they were charging deserts, but really understanding why they were charging deserts is because a lot of folks are afraid to go into communities that they don't know about, that they haven't worked with as much. We need to solve for those that are most vulnerable and for those who are somewhat off the radar. And so that's really important to think about how we're going to be implementing it within rural communities. There's a lot of rural quote unquote disadvantage. Remember, we're going to use that word because that's just with how EPA and many of the federal agencies have labeled that in order to get funding. But yes, we're going to be utilizing the word disadvantaged, but there are a lot of rural disadvantaged communities that are charging deserts that also want, that also need clean air, that also need better health outcomes, that also could use clean transportation plans. And so, you know, that was really important, I think, to us to make sure that we were looking at those communities that that might be off the radar for other folks.
With that, passing along to Chuck.
And Chuck, do you want to talk a little bit about what it was like when Sumner and I approached Jackson to have this opportunity? And Chuck is one of our community members here, and one of the community members that Sumner mentioned that we helped urge them and coach them through getting $150,000 of a state grant to implement EV charging infrastructure there. They're right off the highway 75 South in Georgia. But from what we could tell, there was some significant EV adoption happening within the county, but zero charging infrastructure. So Chuck, do you want to talk about a little bit about you know, what your experience was with us coming to you?
Well, first of all, thank you, Sumner and Pamela, for you all coming.
Uh-oh, we lost your volume.
A lot of needs, and anytime anybody come to us with an opportunity, I try my best to get the right people involved to try to take advantage of those opportunities. And when you all came with that idea, see, my mind is way ahead of a lot of the people in my hometown. I had been away for years, and I came back after traveling the world, military, corporate America, so on and so forth. And so I know that I'm thinking way ahead of a lot of the people, but I have to do that in a way that they have my trust. Now, when you all came with this idea, it was timely for me because it was something that I could present to them that was futuristic, but not too futuristic that they couldn't see the vision. And one of the things that with you in terms of, we have 50 EV vehicles in the state, in Butts County, but we have 0 charging stations. We have no public transportation. We have no taxis. We don't even have Uber. So you wonder, how do people get around in a place like this where you have no kind of public transportation at all? And somehow we figure it out. And the other thing about Jackson is a vacation capital of Georgia, partially because of the Indian Spring. The first federal park is in Jackson. That draws a lot of attention. And as Sumner mentioned, Stranger Things was filmed there. And so they have a lot of visitors come just to look at the places where it was filmed. So we are a community that needs new ideas and needs new things that will help us to move forward. Now, let me share this. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but what were my thoughts when you all brought the electric transportation ideas? See, Jackson in 1890, Jackson was the best city in the state of Georgia. It was recognized, and there's articles about it, as the best city in Jackson. And there were a couple of key things. There were about 8 different things that they listed as why it was the best. But I want to point out two significant things. One, they said it had the best people in the world. What does that mean? There were people who were working together. What I found out was they actually wanted to become the best city. So they worked together to make that happen. One is they changed the education system because they know that education is a powerful tool. As former President Mandela said, education is a tool that can help you to change the world. So what they started to do was to educate more people. Initially, only the wealthy males were educated. So they expanded the education system to educate everybody. Now, here's the one that you'll really love. We had a buggy factory. Now, this is 1890. Now, keep in mind, that was like having a General Motors or Ford factory in a town. Transportation, okay? We had, we were actually building buggies there in Jackson. And so this kind of, you can imagine, you got a good education system, you got a good transportation system, you could buy your buggy right here, you know, in town. And so people started to move to Jackson. So the population grew and it grew in reputation. Now, in terms of how do I feel about it in terms of getting the $150,000, when you all said to us, listen, if you just do the work, we'll help you to write the proposal. We'll help you. We want to help you to get this. I'm telling you, you can be an example. You can be a model for other rural communities. Well, that really excited me, and I trusted you all because you've been there several times. As a matter of fact, I don't remember if you were there, Sumner, but Pamela had participated in the asset-based community development project. Georgia Tech brought their whole city planning class to Jackson, and they used the asset-based community development process, which means you focus on your assets, not just your problems. So Pamela had spent some time with us. They spent a whole day working with us in that workshop to come up with ideas of things that we could do to help move this HACCP project, the Henderson School project, forward. So you had an opportunity to build relationships and trust with the people, because that's with rural people. Keep in mind, trust is so important in order to be able to get them to make decisions to work with you, because they don't trust everybody. Our communities are built on relationships, and that helped. The people didn't feel like you all were strangers because you've been there before. Now, the other part about it is you've created possibilities, because there's a lot that we don't have. And one of the things that helped us a great deal, we found out that our mayor, Mayor Carlos Duffy, as we were going through the conversation, they had done some research on charging stations, working with Georgia Power some years, I think of maybe a couple of years, maybe a year or so back. But they ran into some roadblocks and they kind of dropped the project. So because they had ventured into it, you all actually helped them to get over that hurdle that stopped them from going forward at the time. So that kind of helped us to do it. And interesting enough, Pam, you remember this, we were down to the wire because we convinced the mayor to do it, and he was supposed to get the proposal back to us, and we were going to finish it up for him and dress it up. He actually did the whole thing, which told me he is committed to this. And, you know, when you have people in power who are committed to something, they're going to do everything they can to make it successful. And so this is just a first step in a lot of things that are going to happen with this this clean transportation in Jackson. I also had gone to the superintendent, because you all mentioned the electric buses that were available, and asked them if they were interested, and they said, no, we're not prepared for it right now. And so that's going to be another opportunity. And we're thinking also with this Henderson School project that this is going to become a part of our plan. We probably will come up with a maintenance program to teach students how to repair these electric buses and electric cars or whatever come along. So I am just tremendously excited about this. It's just all kind of possibilities just by initiating this. And we become a role model for rural communities. And as I said, it is not easy to get rural communities to do new things. So why change sometimes? And so I'm just thankful that we have people who are in powerful positions that trust us enough that they're willing to do something different. So
thank you. Thank you so much, Chuck. Thank you for that. That's a great edification. coming from our community and showing that it's important in the ways of which you work as well, and how you work with these communities, and ensuring that you are building that trust as you're going through the process. But thank you for that. I have a couple of questions, and you all, please, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. We'll get to Q&A in the next 5 minutes or so here, but I had a couple of other questions for you all. Aaron and Sumner, what does success look like for you through this program? How will you deem it successful? Either one can go first.
I can start. From a programmatic side of things, we collectively define success as 3 things. So having meaningful impact, so thinking about having new voices activated, working in collaboration with Clean Cities and Communities coalitions, having a community engagement liaison in the coalition itself complete a bold and innovative clean transportation action plan with this community. So that's meaningful impact. Synergistic partnerships is the next kind of pillar that we're using to think about success. And really they're just highlighting getting different sectors involved and supporting the CEL and the coalition's work, and having the ability to kind of start drawing funding from different sources and building that capacity within communities. I mean, a great example that you all gave, right, is that communities able to go after grant funding to support their own work because of these partnerships with the coalition. So beautiful example of success there. And then also thinking internally about the coalitions themselves, having an inclusive organizational culture in which we are helping to break bad habits within coalitions and retaining the community engagement liaisons and having professional development opportunities, and really thinking about what does the leadership of the coalition look like and how are they guiding this coalition to doing more work with communities that really has the benefit in those communities that we're looking for. So big picture, it's about, you know, having the equitable process to bring different voices to the table and help co-develop these solutions. And also being, you know, kind of that bridge with the community and the federal government, and recognizing that, you know, it's much harder for a federal entity to build trust with a local community, and it's much easier for a local entity partnering with a CBO and other trusted members of the community to start to build that trust and kind of build it back, because we know that it's been lost. And so how does that then help facilitate better equitable transportation solutions, and making sure that folks aren't left behind in the EV transition?
Thank you, Sumner.
Yeah, so some similarities, but for me, it's all about getting those federal dollars in the hands of the communities for them to be able to do what they feel they need to do with it and have all those outcomes we talked about, you know, greater access to transportation, cleaner air, better health outcomes, all of those things. But I do a lot with grants in my role. And so when I see some of these federal dollars and big numbers go towards these larger entities that are then coming to Clean Cities coalitions and other local entities and like, oh, hey, can you help us do this? It's like, well, if you had just given the money to the community, then they would have been able to do it. They know what they need, they know what they want. So I just making sure that some of the money is going to the communities that need it most. And then as well, what Aaron has alluded to, for us to have a more diverse organization ourselves. So Pam's helped us with diversifying our hiring practices, as well as helping us think through diversifying board and offering trainings, working with more minority-owned businesses, having more diverse speakers in some of our events. So just a lot of different little day-to-day things where having her in the team and being able to share all these different perspectives as well as different best practices, with her having a diversity consulting background as well, has just been really wonderful and helpful for us even as a small team.
Thank you, Sumner. And Aaron, there are other initiatives that you're working on to advance electric transportation. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the team I work on at NREL really focuses on advanced transportation and deployment side of things. So really figuring out how do we take these new technologies and make sure they're actually being implemented in communities in ways that are successful and equitable. And so one of the other programs that I've worked with is funded through the Joint Office of Energy and Transportation. They are an office that's kind of was stood up between the Department of Energy and the Department of Transportation, and are helping really focus efforts on advancing electric transportation in an equitable way. So the Just Lab Consortium is a group of a variety of different national labs that came together to do a lot of research in this space and really to try to figure out and ask the questions of why has there been inequitable distribution of EVSE and EV adoption, and trying to understand some of these root causes, which we know are very historic and systemic, but then also trying to produce resources for folks, help sheets to better understand how do we go into this and start doing things differently? What does it look like to have a better distribution, to think about citing EVSE in disadvantaged communities? What are best engagement practices, things like that. So there are a ton of different case studies and help sheets and resources actually on their website that are publicly available. And it really aligns so much with what we've been doing in the CG program, but it's just a different format of the information. If other, EV installers or municipalities or folks are asking questions and want a reference point, it's a great place to go to.
Thank you. Thank you. And my vision of success for this is really to see communities be able to take advantage of the innovations that are out there to create cleaner environments, healthier environments, and to hopefully be able to see some economic impact from whether it's, diversifying the way in which they electrify their communities, and or from people coming to visit the site of where Stranger Things is being filmed and driving their EVs and charging their cars while they're walking the Indian Springs Nature Preserve over there. It's beautiful. So if you haven't been to Jackson, Georgia, and you want to go, that's just a cue to go. There's filming all over Georgia, but Jackson's really special too. Reuven, can you go ahead and get our audience questions ready and let us know what the audience has for us?
Sure, and thank you so much for these great presentations and your points of wisdom so far. The questions in the chat center around engagement methods. So Bernice asks, I wonder if any of these activities are being done in other languages. Amanda asks, what methods are you using to engage community members to identify sites for installing EV charging stations? And then later, well, we can ask separately a question about your facilitation techniques. But for now, what are those two, what methods are you using to engage community members? Are you using other languages?
For languages, so as Sumner mentioned, the Buford Highway Corridor has been an area for us that we're a year into this, and anyone who's done community engagement will know that it's tough. It can be tough, and so our connection to that community really just happened over the last 6 months, where we're able to get a strong connection into the community. We know that there's going to be multiple languages, and we're utilizing our community-based partner to be able to help support with that. But we're also utilizing some of the funding that we're given for the CG program to develop materials in other languages as well. So I guess the answer for that would be yes. It's really completely community driven. Whatever the community needs and how we can engage with them is how we will show up. Whether that's a translator on site, or whether that's printed material, or whether it's a translator on webinars. Like, however we need to be able to show up for that community is how we'll show up for them, because it really is what's going to drive the plan doesn't happen without the community leading the work. Do any of you guys have anything to add to that?
Just for a couple of the other questions that were also brought up for facilitation methods, and Pam's the expert, she can speak to more to that, but I can just sort of share in a broader perspective. So with Jackson, for example, we met them at one of their local pizza places for the first meeting, and a lot of the folks from the HASAT, the Henderson High School Alumni Trust Association, were there, and Chuck didn't get to share as much about his organization that he works with in the school, but we worked with them, and that's the leading community-based organization that's in Jackson, but also had members of City of Jackson there as well. And so, you know, Pam very lovely facilitated the conversation of, what do you want to see? What do you love about your community? What do you feel like would bring additional strength and opportunity into your community? And so have this facilitate a dialogue with folks, as well as sharing some of the statistics about their community in terms of air quality, registered EVs, access to transportation, and so on and so forth. So that was one method that we did, is more of that facilitated conversation, that asset-based community development that we've been talking about, as well as with the EV charging siting. So we've had multiple meetings with Jackson and Covington. And so again, community members, but also municipality members have been able to weigh in and say, well, this is the specific park that I know that everyone goes to, so we need to have EV charging here. Or this is the stadium that a bunch of people go to for community events, but also the fleet goes by here a lot, so they need to charge specifically here if we were to have municipal fleet charging as well as community charging. So Pam and I are not the experts in these communities. It was the folks who live there, as well as the municipal leaders who in these meetings came together and said, nope, these are the 3 locations we need to see. And so Pam and I really just helped facilitate, here's how you draft a good grant proposal. Thankfully, this was a very simplified process, because GEFA, our Georgia Environmental Finance Authority, who houses our state energy office, was very aware that this needs to be highly accessible for community-based organizations and smaller organizations in order to participate. And so it was, you know, a couple of pages worth of narrative, but it needed to still be framed, and it needed to provide reasoning and documentation and statistics. And so we just helped walk them through that. But otherwise, it was their information, it was their project, their idea.
Yeah, I love that you say that, Sumner, because we actually toured the city with them. So while one of our first meetings with them, it might have been by webinar. I can't even remember. It was early last year or mid last year. And then when we did our first in person at that pizza parlor, it's actually, as she said, that participatory facilitation, encouraging everyone to participate, making sure everyone was a part of the process. Talking about, I think is really important, and I use asset-based facilitation in all of my community engagement, because it's easy for them to come to the table and talk about what they don't like about their community, what needs to be fixed. That's not why we're there. We want to know why you're still in the community, what's beautiful with your community, and then how do we enhance that with electric transportation? We talked about an e-shuttle for their tours, with their I forget that office, or the folks that actually do the welcoming center. So we talked about e-shuttles. We talked about e-shuttles for their seniors and elderly and folks who go to the VA. So there's a big component of, they literally drew out their own plan and talked about, oh, it would be nice to be able to take bikes from our community over to the Indian Springs. And so we took those rides over there in our cars just to see what the ride was like, how far it was, what the possibilities were. So they developed their own plan. They told us exactly what they needed and what they wanted, and told us where they needed to see it. So yeah, that it made all the difference. You just have to be immersed in the process and let communities really implore active listening. You have to listen really well and take copious notes and come back to them like, is this what I thought I heard you say? And confirm that with them and confirmation methods. So that's a lot of the engagement.
Thanks. And that what I like about this answer is that, Georgia is one spot, but a lot of our audience is from across the country. And what you've identified is a good process that you could put in place anywhere. Listening,
Anywhere.
participating, the use of people, like not the use, the inclusion of people on the ground as the primary leaders of this sort of work. So thanks for sharing that example. Bernice asks, did you do any engagement with multifamily tenants and potential to add EV infrastructure in multifamily buildings? That's always a difficult area to deal with.
So I can say that, so some of the community members that came out, I'm not sure if any of them lived in multifamily, but there is a huge multifamily complex there in Jackson. And there's several in Covington. And while we've talked through this, I know Sumner and I were trying to get some funding to develop a multifamily car share program for short term. And unfortunately, we didn't get the funding to be able to do that. But you're absolutely right. That part of the engagement is there. We do recognize it. We're just looking for the funding to initiate it. So if y'all have some ideas on where we can get funding, we've got the communities ready for it. We just need to get the funding to actually implement it as part of their clean transportation plans. Did you want to add anything, Sumner or Aaron? I don't know if you, Aaron, if you had any focus on multifamily.
I was just gonna share real quick. I know Chuck's organization is looking at some affordable housing options as well in Jackson. And then when we were doing meetings with Covington, we did have representation from the local housing authority there as well. So still in a process, as Pam said, we were trying to come up with some solutions, but have been trying to engage folks from the multifamily housing as well.
Yeah, and from my perspective, because I work with all of the 17 coalitions doing this type of effort, how we, kind of encouraged folks to define community that they were working with. We tried to leave it very open. It didn't have to follow certain geographic or municipal bounds. And so, for example, the group that we have, the coalition in Michigan, is working with 3 different affordable housing communities as their focus. And so they're doing really robust engagement with these communities and with the developers and trying to figure out, what do clean transportation solutions look like in these communities. And as you're finalizing these developments or, kind of putting all the final touches on the transportation infrastructure here, can we make sure that we are including the tenants and also thinking about clean transportation? So maybe it is EV charging availability at some of these multifamily housing units. So a really creative way to start thinking about, how do we go directly to folks and start thinking about both from the developer end and the tenant end, how do we make sure that this isn't forgotten in the overall consideration of transportation and access?
Chuck, real quick, because Sumner touched on it a little bit about the multifamily, the potential for multifamily housing there for the HACCP project. I just wanted to mention something about this community that's also really unique. The community members bought back their old high school that had been abandoned in their neighborhood. It's a very large property there. And they're working currently with some Georgia Tech folks as well as folks from EPA to figure out how to revitalize this high school. And so we've been talking about, of course, EV charging there. We've been talking about solar electrification and battery storage, basically making it a resilience hub. But there's some property there where we also talked about putting multifamily. So Chuck, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about, really quickly, probably 2 minutes, to talk about HACCP project.
You gonna give me that much time?
Yeah, 2 minutes.
This is, it's interesting. This project is a wonderful project. It's amazing. No matter where people are from, if I share this with them, they get excited about it. And I guess it's because it's almost like a resurrection. This property had been sitting in the community, deteriorating the community around it since 2010, when I got involved in 2016. And it's almost like we have lit a fire under the community. First of all, I think what this has done is to show them that anything is impossible until it's done. And what I have proven to them, if you can dream and you can put your shoulder to the plow, you can get anything done, because we had to get over some insurmountable challenges to get to this point, to where we had nothing. We had no money and no organization when this all started. And I told them that God had told me when I came back there, I want you to do something that will fail unless I step in. And we failed. We didn't raise enough money. The superintendent, the new superintendent came in and made us a better offer, and just made it possible, and to the point that we own the property completely with no restrictions. So let me touch on this housing issue. When the EPA helped us develop a comprehensive business plan so that business people in particular could understand the reality of what we were doing, that it could be done. And not just business people, but anybody that reads it, you can see it can be done. It was just a concept, an idea that we started out with. And so in doing that plan, they're the ones that came up with the idea. We didn't, I won't say we didn't come up with that idea. We were just focusing on the building, not the housing. But the discussion about affordable housing has been so intense. They saw the need, and so they presented it to us. And when I presented it to the board, 60% of them said yes, 40% said no. And one thing I don't do is I don't override my board just because the majority said do something. I need to have as close to 100% buy-in as possible, because these people are volunteers. And in order to get that, I will table something and wait for time for them to feel better about it if possible. Well, in the meantime, I was going back through some history. I found a document that I had written in 2016 with talking points for us to go before the board to get them not to sell that property to an organization that was going to turn the whole building into a senior home. And in there, we made a statement that our community needs more than a senior home. However, we want to buy this property, and if there's a need for housing, we will include that in our program. Well, one of the board members had said, the reason I don't want to do it because it was not in our original plan. Well, guess what? It was in our original plan. We said if there was a need for it, we would consider it. That board member has changed their mind completely. So sometimes you got to let things kind of soak into people and give them time to make decisions. One thing I've learned, as I said earlier, with country folks, you're not going to make them do anything. Okay. If they don't support you in doing it, they'll work against you. So you got to build that trust, but building trust means you're willing to listen and you're willing to compromise. And sometimes it's going to take them a while to make up their mind. You won't have their support. They'll sometimes even say yes, but they're not going to support you. And I know that from, growing up in that community and dealing with rural communities. So as we push this thing out to rural communities, that challenge is going to be there in just about every rural community, because rural people tend to move slow and they do things based on trust. And to build that trust, you got to spend time listening to what they have to say and focus on their needs, not your own needs.
I love it. And that takes us really well into our breakout session. So